Welcome to this episode of The World According to Irina Tsukerman, our very special series on global politics on the KJ Masterclass Live. Irina Tsukerman is a US based national security and human rights lawyer, as well as a renowned geopolitical analyst. Her writings and commentary have appeared in diverse US and international media and have been translated to over a dozen languages. Every fortnight in The World According to Irina Tsukerman, we traverse the geopolitical landscape and delve into pressing international issues and gain insight from Irina's expert perspective. Welcome to the show once again, Irina.
Thank you. Glad to be here as always.
Welcome, welcome. Several big topics again today, and let's touch the big topic of this Syria, the fall of the Assad regime. So, how should we look at it? Its impact on on the region, on Ukraine, because Assad is in Russia, and all that impact down there. So, help us understand what this means for that part of the region and for a person sitting in this part of the world.
Well, all evidence is pointing to the fact that Assad's fall, or at least the push towards his fall, was pre-planned. Turkey and different rebel groups, including HTS, um, had been gathering strength over the past year, and in the past few months have made significant progress. Iran was caught unawares because they were in the middle of dealing with a fallout from internal security issues such as Haniya's assassination, the Hezbollah operation, the war in Gaza, all of these things that weakened its own and drained its own resources and proxies. So it was unable to offer the support, and it was reportedly manipulated into a false sense of security as well. The biggest winner, of course, is Turkey and Qatar. We have seen the heads of intelligence of both countries entering Damascus in the wake of the event, and the HTS leader Al Julani was basically their driver. The appointed leader Ahmed Shara um, is it's not clear how long he's ultimately going to last. HTS has been making decentralized, pluralistic sounding statements. They claim they do not want war with Israel. They have allowed Israel to destroy the military equipment and tanks that belong to Assad's army without interfering, but at the same time, there are reports of attacks on minorities, on Kurds in different parts of the country. Uh, Not as much Christians, but definitely others. The Druze already have declared that they would prefer to join forces with Israel and basically fully annex the Golan Heights areas where they reside to Israel. So it's going to be an interesting time. Russia has been is increasingly being forced out of its bases, but have not fully evacuated yet. I think they're trying to preserve some semblance of a presence because Syria is a very geopolitically important territory. Iran, for now, seems to be focusing on its nuclear program due to having suffered heavy losses everywhere. And Ukraine has gotten a bit of a leeway because some of the Russian forces essentially abandoned their positions in the light of what happened in Syria. Russia ultimately evacuated, as did China, its diplomatic personnel from Syria, but there is still some presence remaining. And ultimately, the events in Ukraine still continue to unfold. There's still advances by the Russian military in some areas. They're slow, but they still acquire new territory. And the settlement is still nowhere in sight. But Syria, of course, weakened Russia substantially and challenged the naval and geopolitical dominance in that part of the world.
Right, right, Irina. So what happens? How should we look at it? Its impact on Putin, its impact on Russia, its impact on Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine war. How do you think the U.S. would be looking at it, and do you think it gives some hope in terms of in terms of the war ending soon in Russia, Ukraine?
Well, it is a blow to Russia. Assad is now in Moscow. Essentially, he's probably going to. He received asylum from Russia. He is going to be staying there for quite a while. He is still very much a wanted for assorted war crimes, but I don't think there's going to be any aggressive pursuit. On the contrary, there is now a discussion of removing the HTS leader Al Julani from the U.S. terrorist list. Ukraine is certainly gaining from Assad's fall. There is discussions that Ukraine was part of the rebel movement that brought about Assad's fall. They trained some of the rebels and provided support. They had also attacked some of the bases there because essentially the Iranian and Russian collaboration in Syria provided additional support to the Russian troops in Ukraine. And of course, anything that could weaken that coalition was advantageous to Ukraine. But ultimately, still the Russia forces press on because they still have people to spare, and they're also using still North Korean soldiers for their counteroffensive in Kursk and putting pressure on Ukraine there as well. That's still ongoing. The Ukrainian forces are still in Kursk. Yeah, so Russia is still fighting on both fronts as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, how should would you think Trump is looking at that? Because he's now active in Middle East, and a lot of things are happening in Middle East now. So, do we, from the world's perspective, is the Syria problem over with new regime, or will it be just a new regime and it will be like the old times? Will there be peace in that region if I look at from this part of the world?
Well, Trump said that he is prioritizing the Ukraine, settling the Ukraine war. He believes it's going to be difficult and complicated, more so than the 24 hours he promised um, during his campaign days. I think he's getting more realistic assessment of the situation, and it helps that Russian oligarchs and others have signaled that they will not be interested in any peace deal or peace negotiations, that they intend to press on and to try to advance militarily, which presents Trump with a dilemma. In the Middle East, he warned Hamas that he wants a hostage deal and hostages released before his inauguration. But so far, the diplomatic impasse between Israel and Hamas has not been broken. There's been negotiations. The current CIA director Burns went to Doha to join in on the talks. There's been rumors of a breakthrough, but so far that seems to be still far from being finalized. These rumors keep percolating, but we've been there before. So Trump is now faced with a dilemma. There's also increasing noise about Iran. There are talks that Trump would perhaps allow Israel to attack Iranian nuclear bases, in part over concern that Iran will now focus on finalizing the nuclear program due to its heavy losses in other areas in terms of its proxies. That may be, for now, the IDF has attacked the power stations in Yemen belonging to the Houthis, which have, uh, for now, continued their attacks. Of course, the power station situation could um, delay and temporarily put the Houthi attacks out of action, but it's probably not a permanent solution. After all, their weapons mostly remain intact and their leadership is still in place. They are gearing up so far to be the strongest surviving proxy for Iran.
Right. And from Assad's point of view, is it the end of Assad, or do you think there are any chances of him making a comeback?
It doesn't seem like that is very likely. He is widely hated throughout the country. In fact, all these disparate factions joined forces simply to take down Assad. What happens next is anyone's guess, but the biggest concern is that Turkey is gathering forces at the border. They're looking to invade and essentially turn Syria into a sphere of influence, if not some sort of an occupied territory or colony, with one of the terrorists there as an appointed uh, governor of that, would be province. If that's the case, we can see a political and military battle between Israel on the one hand and Turkey on the other. And in that situation, it's not clear whether Iran will join Turkey against Israel or whether it will stay out of it and essentially focus on rebuilding its strengths elsewhere. If Turkey becomes a serious security problem in Syria for Israel, it's going to be a much more serious obstacle than just some terrorist organizations, which are non-state actors and are likely to squabble among themselves. Turkey has a serious military, and it's got seemingly endless financial sources via Qatar. Trump has assessed that Turkey does has have very serious ambitions for Syria. Most likely, U.S. will not be intervening unless U.S. troops are attacked, but it's also unlikely that Trump will prioritize withdrawal of these troops in the near future. There's a concern about the fate of oil. There's a potential for a Qatar-Turkish pipeline that could indirectly benefit Iran as well. Will certainly benefit the Saudis, who are also supporting the whole deal. There's also concern about the fate of Iraq with the NATO drawdown having been finalized with the Biden administration. Iraq remains the one big sphere of influence for Iran. With the loss of Syria, uh, the supply chain for Iran is broken. So they will surely try to hang on to their remainders in their territory, while Russia, China, and others may try to make a move. Turkey is one of the countries who may try to capitalize by backing Sunni militias and groups formerly affiliated with the Ba'ath Party, with Zarqawi. Um, some of these groups, they're not as numerous as the Shia population in Iraq, but they could be well organized with Turkish support, particularly if the Kurdish, Syrian, and Iraqi autonomy is disrupted with significant forces. But for that, um, Turkey would not probably want to endanger its own troops. It would be a long road for them through Syria to the Kurdish areas, and probably Kurds who are well armed and well trained would put up a significant fight, even if many civilians are killed in the process. So we are talking about uh, coming to some sort of arrangement with Iran, or alternatively bringing in Afghan groups such as ISIS-K, which seems to be on the verge of toppling Taliban, and its Central Asian and Iranian contingencies into play, and transferring some of these groups and some of the Al Qaeda remnants to bringing them into Iraq to assist with the process of strengthening Turkish hand there. All of that seems to be a long-term prospect. For now, Turkey still has to decide what to do about Syria, but I think with the Iraqi elections looming next year, that will be something to keep in mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, lot Middle East is lot in news. Trump is lot in news. Trump advisors are also in news, and Trump Tower is also a lot in news. What is this with Trump Tower in Saudi Arabia?
So
Help
the
us understand about.
his son, who is in charge of the Trump administration, because Trump, as the president elect, needs to not be directly involved with that project while he's in office, has announced the opening of the tower in Saudi Arabia. That's been in negotiations all throughout the Biden term. It was planned since the beginning, since Trump's first term, and it was very much a wanted project. It's very much a prestige project. Trump already has assorted business in Qatar of the real estate variety, and Riyadh is one of those things that ambitions that he's always wanted to fulfill, kind of like the Moscow tower that has been long since promised to him but has not yet materialized, and the current tensions with Russia make it extremely unlikely to happen in the next few years at least. Um, but the Riyadh Tower is a major announcement, and it's interesting because I think Saudis view the Trump presidency more favorably than they do Biden's, but there's still a lot of caution, political distrust over Trump's failure to address the Aramco attack by Iran-backed forces in 2019. And the situation has also changed. Saudi Arabia has normalized with Iran. Trump is looking to pressure Iran to bring it to the negotiation table, which will include the return to a maximum pressure sanctions policy, but it could also include allowing Israel to attack some of its military and nuclear targets. So all of that leaves a lot of uncertainty, but business seems to be going as usual.
Right. Business seems to be going on as well. A lot of people are talking about a lot of things, but nobody seems to be talking about the mysterious drones over the US. Pentagon, White House, everyone have denied it, but the plot continues to thicken. Who owns these drones? Where are they again? If I ask, are they some UFOs or coming out from outer universe?
Well, the this has been going on for exactly a month now. The first drones were spotted on November 18th. Um, since then, the number seems to have grown and spread across six and now seven or eight states, including California, where the U.S. military took note of their presence. It seems to be a mixture of different things. At least some of the incidents involve Chinese connections. In one incident, a Chinese national was arrested after flying a commercial drone he used to take pictures of a US military base and then attempting to flee the country by airplane and to return to China. In other cases, amateur drone enthusiasts disrupted one of the largest U.S. Air Force base operations by flying the drones too close to the site. In some cases, civilians um, used the opportunity from new regulations allowing them to fly commercial drones at night to do so, and these drones are becoming more numerous as the drone industry picks up speed. And some of the drones could be part of official US military exercises that have been not announced by the administration, but several incidents involve um, Chinese or other observers attempting to surveil US military targets, and the fact that the Pentagon has dismissed even those incidents and has treated all of the incidents as if there's nothing to worry about, and basically dismissed all of these incidents regardless of their potential cause without a very serious inquiry or announcement of some sort. That in itself is a bad signal to those US adversaries watching this scenario. And if some of them are using this confusing situation to push the envelope and to test responses, they are certainly seeing a lot of incoherence and a lot of non confrontational avoidance from the administration.
Right. Uh, doesn't it give also a signal that that no one seems to be in control? That US looks a bit vulnerable with no concrete sort of a thing coming from the administration. For means it can become very confusing in any militaries across the world. They keep on doing their own things, with regards to their own preparedness. But that does not lead to so much of confusion anywhere. But this is a bit too much, and if it is not the US military or if it's not some US entity, and people will ask it like that, because there is no clarity here, then that shows that US is very vulnerable. Drones can come in and go. People might find it difficult. They will need to cross the borders. You know, Trump may close those borders, but what about drones? Drones are seem to be, then people will hang themselves, put them on the drones and get into US, reach as far as the White House.
It's very strange, especially, and it's even stranger given what happened in the UK with the incident involving US intelligence identified drones over nuclear bases, which, by the way, still have not gotten any clear explanation. There's been an inquiry, but there's been no clear determination about the origin of those drones. I have trouble believing that all of these incidents are completely coincidental and only involve daredevils, pranks, and hoaxes. There's got to be some mixture of adversarial efforts, even if those efforts use locals, maybe Chinese nationals or hired mercenaries to test this the response, because even if there is a confirmation bias in public note of some of these drones over time, the fact that they are observably spreading to other states and there is clear indications where they were none previously indicates a serious problem. And if the response to general panic by the US population is to increase the use of drones rather than to stay put, for a while until the panic subsides, that too is a bad, a very bad reflection on the public consciousness of the situation. So if all of these people are commercial drone enthusiasts, entirely civilian and American, who are simply ignoring the fact that they are causing mass panic, that is also not a good situation and still requires some sort of a communication. And now there is also Rand Paul is blocking uh, a measure that would authorize local authorities to track the drones and to make determinations about their origin, which is also going to cause some problems.
Right, right. And let's talk about a bit about President Biden himself, and he is making news for all this migration as well as presidential pardon. What is this presidential pardon about? I read a bit about it, and the topmost pardons, if I understand, was under, during the Second World War. After that, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and then the least was under George Bush Senior. But what has Biden done or not done here in terms of presidential pardons?
Well, he granted an astonishing 39 political pardons and hundreds, if not thousands, something like 1,500 commutations of sentences. The presidential pardons essentially absolves the individuals affected from any federal legal responsibility for anything that is discussed in the language of the pardon. In Hunter Biden's case, that covered a period of 10 years. Those other individuals, it may vary, but some say that this was a preemptive measure to avoid investigations by the Trump administration. Of course, the problem with this logic is that it opens doors to Trump to do his own stunt of the same sort for all of his officials for an indeterminate period of time. Some of them have been accused of assorted mis misbehaviors in various spheres. So if Trump decides to give a general pardon to anyone he's ever considered for any position, that will cover a lot of people and leave them blameless from any sort of serious federal investigation. And this creates a completely lawless situation where there's an incentive for criminals to enter public service rather than the other way around.
Right, right. And Tulsi Gabbard is also in news. Irina, what has happened with regards to a Russian oligarch and Tulsi Gabbard? Why is she in the news at the moment?
Well, Tulsi Gabbard hasn't been stopped being the news. She remains a controversial nominee for DNI position given her past meetings with Assad, her attacks on uh, any serious measures against Iran, including the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, and her general, and the fact that she was a Democratic presidential candidate who joined a Republican administration and is considered very isolationist. Um, her policies seem to favor doing business with dictators and so forth. The latest revelation is that one of the Russian oligarchs was one of her supporters and had political ties to her. Um, there seems to be no specific no specific criminal link so far that would hold that would cause her political issues, but it's bad optics, and there's a lot of skepticism in Congress, in the Senate, about her nomination already. She had apparently conversed and interviewed with a number of Republican senators who were not impressed with her general knowledge and handling of the sort of questions that could come up during a hearing. They find that she is ill prepared for the job, aside from all the political controversies. So while Trump may feel like he owes her for her support, perhaps a sensitive security position is not the way to show it, especially if she is not well fit for it to begin with.
Right. No, lots of these news, coming out of different officials, favoring one person, another state in different parts of the world, and especially coming out of the U.S. So for us, we just don't know. People think that people in very strong positions, they have got great deal of responsibility, and they will not do anything which is uh, against any of the norms of their own countries. But for us outside, it looks like a lot of politics behind the scenes happening, a lot of people talking something else, doing something else, and that raises a lot of question amongst the topmost officials, or even presidential candidates, and that's a very difficult thing for us to understand. But be that as it may, a lot of let's move on to that part of the world, from several presidential candidates to South Korean president. He has been impeached. What happens to him? Will there be treason charges against him, or does it not? What does it all mean? You suddenly talk about martial law, you revoke it, and then all these hell breaks with markets falling and all these things. What does it mean for us?
Well, he most likely will be removed from his position, and I think the next president will come from the same party because there hasn't been an election yet, but it could cost the party in an election in the future, and it is possible that his actions played right into the hands of the very enemies that he claimed were behind his political opposition. If that is the case, then he just gave them a big gift. It is, as I suspected when the whole story broke, there may have been a suggestion or disinformation from Russia or China or via North Korea or somebody like that that caused him to use the step. Either I think in part he was already desperate to save his political legacy. He was already quite unpopular for unrelated to security reasons, but if somebody nudged him in the direction of taking that measure, he could have fallen for adversarial disinformation. And I think how he came about with this decision needs to be investigated, not only because his removal seems to be imminent, but because we have to understand what was the political situation, whether a meddling by a foreign state was responsible for this decision, and if that is the case, how to secure and prevent those channels from wreaking havoc in the future, whether it came from the intelligence community, from the political community, from the military, from a seemingly friendly country. We need to find out whether there's been any sort of nudging or communication that prompted him to take the step, or whether he was so desperate and grasping for power and for straws that he was willing to take steps that were very obviously going to backfire. It just seems an extremely reckless step without any evidence or backing for it, which is why I think many people wonder whether or not he was operating under some influence or extortion from somebody.
Influence and extortion from somebody for a president means how do we understand all this, or does it get that there can be a lapse of understanding or judgment? Aren't there controls anywhere that are you no one, I think, when it's a political system, can just go and suddenly decide by themselves that there has to be a martial law, and there must be some process. Can you just go and do it in anywhere, however uh, you know uh, conservative or closed system of administration it is? But here it's not even a closed system.
It's very strange because as much as everyone has criticized Donald Trump for being impulsive and unpredictable, even in his most radical decisions, he had consulted with trusted parties, whoever they were, and we can talk about whether or not, whether that process was appropriate. But he never just simply silently decide out of the blue to do something. He could blurt out a comment, of course, but even those blurted comments were informed by his conversations with other people. So here we are seeing something very odd. We are seeing this individual this President Yoon act out of the blue without referencing any clear information by anybody. No specific official or intelligence head, security agency was cited in his decision. Nothing, no sources of information were indicated. It seems like he didn't mention any advisors that he would normally consult with on taking a drastic measure with respect to a seemingly calamitous security situation. None of that seems to line up with what normally would be taken, even in the case of an extreme emergency, which obviously this was
Right.
definitely not. So either he temporarily lost his mind and acted out of entirely hallucinatory thinking, or something else was involved and he was compelled to do so, or did follow an advice that he did not wish to disclose or reveal.
Yeah, especially the systems are needed, especially when you are dealing with a neighbor like North Korea, who looks and sees things as differently and are also trying to expand their diplomatic footprint across the world with sending also their own soldiers in Russia Ukraine war. Be that as it may, a lot of pressure on presidents nowadays. In France, President Macron, he has appointed a centrist ally as PM after the government has collapsed. How should we understand? Means we are seeing a lot of these changes down in their government and their administration. For us, from this part of the world, we have our own system of understanding of democracy, about our parliament system. But how do we understand that part of parliament? Means why are the PMs changing so fast?
Well, the president has the power, constitutional power in France to appoint the prime ministers, but the last person he appointed, by the way, after the win by the radical left and centrist coalition against the Le Pen's party, um, the Mélenchon wide for prime minister's position, but Macron, exercising his right, appointed someone from his own ranks. This individual broke the record by lasting only 3 months in office. That was the record shortest stint by a prime minister in France ever in history. And essentially, the reason for the collapse was the distrust in him. He was basically distrusted and ousted from office. The government appeared to be on the verge of complete collapse. It basically collapsed. There were talks whether Macron was going to resign early, which he refused to do, and instead posted this other person, his ally, again continuing to try to maintain the balance and avoid bringing in the radical left into the governing position. But all of that raises a lot of questions about what is it that the last prime minister did so terribly wrong, that there was this massive distrust. Why aren't we hearing more about it? Does it mean that Macron's own judgment is affected? And how are the radical left groups and the radical right, for that matter, utilizing these major uh, shaking positions in Macron's ranks to strengthen their own positions? What does that mean for the political future of France?
Right, right, Irina. Let's move from this all these things about government and all these things to something good. If I understand, British Prime Minister Starmer, he wants to go for some green initiative, but the I don't understand why does he ask money from from Saudi Arabia for this? Means why would a British Prime Minister ask money from Saudi Arabia for green initiative?
This is as big a question for me as it is for you. Saudi Arabia has been a major investor in the UK economy for quite some time, but the green initiative issue is an electoral promise by Starmer's government, which after 6 months in office is facing significant economic challenges. The challenges are not unique to Starmer. It's not just the result of his own actions. They have been basically building up for some time, and through multiple administrations, there's been ongoing challenges that were never quite resolved for decades, to be honest. Um, Ukraine never quite rebuilt its economy after World War II, and since then there's been various efforts to um, kind of reestablish itself as a major world power, but uh, a lot of that potential has been squandered, and the series of failures within the Tory party, which had governed prior to Starmer coming to office, significantly contributed to the decline. One of the major issues concerned the issue of energy. The Sunak government outsourced gas acquisition to the United States, essentially leaving UK in a vulnerable independent energy position. Labor promised to bring in green initiatives as supplements, and also for environmental reasons, and to move the UK in a green direction. The problem with all of that is green transition is extremely expensive. There is a reason why some of the leaders green transition are oil and gas rich countries with significant capital to spend on these sort of transition practices. Everybody else, developing countries, are basically dependent on stimulus from COP29 like ventures. It's simply expensive to develop these alternative energies. Many of them require additional research and development applications that are untested on scale. Uh, um, Many of these green initiatives are dependent on oil and gas and involve significant levels of processing. Nuclear energy too is not cheap to implement. It makes energy cheaper in the long run, but also requires investment into storage, into safety mechanisms, and so forth. So everything comes with a price, and the UK just does not have the money. So Starmer is faced with a dilemma. He does not want to break a major promise, electoral promise. But the promise is not just to the British population. The promise is also to his financial and political backers and investors and companies that are counting on him to implement the initiatives. And since he is short on capital and the country is in crisis, and he seems to be in a very uncertain position as a result, despite being in office for only 6 months, he found that perhaps the best way to do that is to get money from somewhere else. And so he went to Saudi Arabia to try to invite investments into these green initiatives. Now, it is true that Saudis have been looking to invest into green projects, hydrogen being primarily one of them, and they're looking to develop their own hydrogen bases. I'm not entirely sure though, but the questionable green initiatives in the UK, which is struggling to pay off its existing projects is exactly the kind of opportunity they're necessarily looking for. Um, Starmer insists this will revitalize the economy. The question whether that investment will actually turn into give a return or turn into another, essentially will go asking for more money to feed itself. At the end of the day, that remains an open question. But the optics of that were not great. The optics of a British Prime Minister traveling to Saudi Arabia not to propose some mutually beneficial and significant opportunity, but basically to beg for donations for a luxury program. And many people see these green initiatives as luxury programs, which are draining on the economy at a time of emergency. Mm, this raises a lot of questions about priorities in his government.
Absolutely. Lots of questions here. And in fact, a person like layman like me would ask, where has all the money of the British government gone? Means it was supposed to be a very rich government, rich country, and the prime minister, obviously, others used to go and ask for it. Why has that money? Where has it gone? It's a bit difficult to understand that Britain will have to come to this state. In China's case, we can understand it was spending a lot of money everywhere in that
Sure.
road initiatives and everything,
Mhm.
helping other countries for whatever reasons. But in Britain's case, difficult to understand. Be that as it may, let's understand a bit about these reports about deep state involvement of Biden administration in deep state attacks on India. India is very close to the US in that sense. India also is needed by the US for its for disentangling from China, balancing out China. Why would there be? Why are these reports coming out?
Well, it's interesting because it's the first time that the Indian officials actually didn't just, tweet about general, differences with with the Biden administration or some sort of, political attacks, but specifically pointed to officials in the current U.S. State Department as masterminding campaigns and essentially funding or backing external initiatives that seek to undermine India's security, image, reputation, and so forth. I'm not entirely sure whether they are referring to the indictment of a um, a, major billionaire in India who's close to the BJP to the ruling BJP party, or whether they're more concerned about the Khalistani situation, the State Department meetings, and essentially the apparent backing of assorted media that has launched political attacks on India at various points of time, whether we are talking about some new specific initiative or the collective of what happened over the past 4 years. That is where uh, it's not clear what the reference is. What is clear, however, that does seem to be a general Biden administration preference for building relations with all sorts of opposition groups, and not just in India, but many different countries that seem to be aligned ideologically with the way the Biden administration seems to want to see the world. Whether or not that is actually the case is an entirely different question, and many times some of these opposition movements consist of extremist and radical groups.
Right, right. Very difficult to understand. Biden administration is not able to see the drones down there in their own country. They are looking at the world in their own light, especially when there is just only a few days for them to go, and the new administration coming in. Do you think Trump will look at it differently?
Yes, I do. I think, first of all, he will spend a lot last time about concerning with the internal matters in other countries. As a matter of principle, no matter what those countries are, I don't think he'll be concerned with anything there unless those issues significantly impact the U.S. and U.S. security. I think the whole issue about assorted political um, struggles inside India is just not going to be of his interest. He'll be talking about tariffs, about energy deals, about security cooperation, counterterrorism cooperation, basically hard power and economic issues, not soft power and internal political matters. So I think there's going to be a significant shift. Much will depend, of course, on whether his overhaul of security agencies and the State Department is going to be successful. Allegedly, he has learned from his mistakes rather than leaving important positions empty. He is going to try to fill them with loyalists who may or may not be competent, but most likely will at least follow the official line and not meddle in matters that are out of their jurisdiction and specific authority in their positions. However, if he fails to do so, we can expect that despite whatever the official position of the administration, some of the State Departments will either try to slow down some of the official initiatives or they will continue to meddle on some level in India's affairs or anyone else's affairs the same way they have done so in the past by indirectly forming alliances, giving funding to groups that is not being clearly tracked and so forth. Of course, the Doge agency or group is supposed to be tracking government efficiency and cutting down on expenditures that are not clearly justifiable. But at the end of the day, they can't be everywhere at once. So, of course, people who know the system very well and who know these financial mechanisms could, in theory, be empowered to do so despite all of these audits and overviews, which is why it's extremely important to fill the ranks of the leading State Department officials with the right people and to make clear um, the limitations of their authority.
Absolutely. There's much to understand about all these happenings in the world, and for all those, we come to you every 2 weeks to understand it. And that we have understood that word in this episode a bit more better than we did earlier on. So with this, it's set up on this very special edition of the World According to Irina Shukerman on the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.